Does having children who are not Christians disqualify a man from pastoral ministry based on Titus 1:6? Well, let's take a look at the context for Titus 1:6. The surrounding context is Paul has left Titus on the island of Crete to appoint elders in all the churches on that island. And he's giving him a list of the kind of men that should be in leadership in those churches. And he starts in verse 6 by saying an overseer, one of these guys, these elders that I'm going to ask you to appoint, here's the criteria. Number one, they must be above reproach. The idea being that there may be charges against him, but none of those charges stick. He's a man of integrity. He's the husband of one wife. He only has eyes for his wife. And he has children, it says in Titus 1:6, who believe. His children are believers and not open to the charge of debauchery or insubordination. So as Jesus is establishing leadership criteria in his church through his apostle, the apostle Paul, one of these is that he is somebody whose leadership can be trusted, and his leadership can be trusted in the area of his family, primarily with his wife and his kids. And so this is the top criteria for leadership. This is what gives him the privilege to even be considered for leadership, is that his leadership is seen in the lives of his wife and his kids. So this is the area that makes him eligible to lead in the church. His family shows his competence as a leader. His family is the proving ground for his ministry. So when a man shows that he's faithful over a little, like his family, his wife and kids, he shows that he can be faithful over more, like God's family in the church. And so when it comes to summarizing this idea in Titus 1:6, I think the idea is that the men who should lead the church should be influential fathers. And so his influence, his leadership of his kids shows if he's qualified to lead in a church. And if he's qualified to lead a church, it'll be seen in the behavior of his kids. And so when you think about, you can pause here and go to 1 Samuel chapter 2, and you can see the story of Eli, where he was not qualified to lead at the temple because his children were so debauched. They were so awful. And so just like this verse doesn't require a man to be married in order to be a pastor, husband of one wife, so I do not think it requires a man to have children either. So you can be an elder without children. I don't think this verse requires that a man have children in order to be pastors. But then second, when it comes to what this actually says, if he does have children, what does this say? What is the assessment? What's the responsibility does this verse place on a church leader? What are the orders that Jesus gives to pastors, leaders, elders in his church? Well, they're required, I think, to have influence that inspires obedience from their children. You see, the word children can be used for offspring of any age, but the word debauchery can't. The word debauchery does not describe 5-year-olds. It doesn't describe 2-year-olds. It, for the most part, doesn't describe 13-year-olds either. Debauchery strongly suggests that these are older children. He's also so lived that when his children are older, there's an obedience. And you can see this in 1 Timothy chapter 3. There's a respect because his life is one of godly influence. So the ESV says his children are to be believers, but the word can also be translated faithful, trustworthy, reliable, and obedient. And I think that would be a better translation. That is how I understand this criteria, that his children are to be faithful or obedient, namely faithful and obedient to him as their father. So I do not think this is a requirement that his children be saved. Now, why do I say that? Well, first, his godly character never guarantees that one's children will be saved. And it's this issue in context is the believer's character. His life can influence them towards salvation, and it should, but his character is not seen in whether or not his children are saved. The salvation of a person's children does not reflect at all on that husband or even that wife's character at all. Second, while it's true that the word translated believers or faithful is never used for non-Christians in the New Testament, outside of the New Testament, faithful is how it's most often translated. So this word is most often translated outside the New Testament with the word faithful, and this word is used to describe the actions of water and illness. So this word is used to describe things that are at best non-Christian. Third, the phrase after the word believers in the ESV says nothing about their salvation, but it looks at the children's what? Their character, not open to the charge of debauchery or insubordination. These are examples that explain the requirement that the child be faithful or obedient. They are faithful, not open to these charges. So it's not talking about salvation. Now, the word charge moves beyond gossip, moves beyond one's parenting a younger child. It moves beyond those things to accusation with evidence. That's what that word describes, accusation with evidence against the behavior of an older child. So kids whose lives have opened themselves to the accusation of debauchery are expressing their lives in wild living, drunkenness, drug use, partying, promiscuity, wasteful, out of control living. That's what that word means. That's what that word refers to, debauchery. The word insubordination refers to flagrant disobedience, rebellion, even heresy, a refusal to live under God's authority or dad's authority. So none of that can reasonably be considered obedient, trustworthy, or faithful. In other words, their lives don't bring shame on or discredit his leadership. Their lives, the overall tenor of their lives, not individual incidences. The church that he serves in, the church or his witness for Christ, is not undermined by the lives of these children. And so overall, that's what I think this idea is talking about. It's not the salvation of the children, but it is the lives of the children that show whether or not this man has the qualifications for godly leadership. So that means a man with children who are not Christians, but who are living upright lives, living lives that are good, living lives that are moral lives in the general sense of the word, not in the vertical God to human being sense of the word, but are living generally good lives. That is a reflection on his leadership. That they're living good lives, even though they haven't given their lives to Christ. And so that's the idea of Titus 1:6, that it doesn't disqualify a man from pastoral leadership if his children are not Christians, but it does if his children are out of control, if his children are living lives of rampant rebellion, rampant disregard of God's laws, then that would definitely call his pastoral ministry into question. So hope that was helpful. See you again for another Ask Redeemer soon.